Think about this. Retirement isn't just relaxation. It's 30 years of unemployment, right? The paycheck stops, but the bills don't. And we got to figure out, are you ready for that or not? I think more than anything, we need to start with the mindset shift. I think a lot of people think about retirement being like a few years, and because that's kind of what it's always been in the back of your head, right? Grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, they retired and it seemed like they were old when they retired, and you know, retirement wasn't that long for them. But people are living a lot longer now, and if you put some time and effort into your planning, retirement could come early for you. So we're literally looking at 20 to 30 years worth of retirement or unemployment, right? The working years, the income is flowing in, but the retirement years, you got to figure out how to create paychecks that are going to sustain those 20 or 30 years worth of retirement, right? You've been working for 40 years and then all of a sudden you're going to stop, and now you've just got whatever retirement planning you've done for you to rely on. And so I think that when we think about retirement, it's time to start shifting our mindset from retirement's just going to be a few years to it could be as many as 30 or more. So I think one good thing to think about when it comes to that 30 years of unemployment, if you think about your average expenses, right? So how do we start preparing for this 30 years of unemployment? If we start thinking about what your average expenses are, right? Say it's $4,000 to $6,000 a month, right? And then we spread that out over 30 years. That's literally $1.5 or $2 million worth of savings that you're going to need to have saved up for you to last as long as retirement could, right? And so when we think about that, we got to think about, hey, there's 30 years worth of time where things could go really, really right, or they could go really, really wrong, right? And so since you're here watching this video, you're starting to educate yourself, right? If we want to figure out how to fill that 30 years worth of unemployment in, you know, I think continuing to educate yourself is something that's going to be very important. So I would love to be walking alongside you, educating you along the way throughout those 30 years. So if videos like this are really helpful to you, like, subscribe. You're going to get notified on all the different topics that we have and that we talk about, whether it's income planning, investment planning, tax planning, healthcare, legacy planning. Those are all pieces of that 30 years worth of unemployment. But we've retired. We've kind of looked at, hey, here's what our average expenses are. For example, they're $4,000 to $6,000 a month. If we spread that over 30 years, we need $1.5, $2 million worth of dollars. But right, that gap could continue to widen if we think about inflation and taxes and different things like that going up. If you're unsure about how do I calculate what my income gap is going to be, I think it's fairly simple. Like, the first thing that I would do is just sit down and figure out, okay, here's what my retirement income could look like, right? Maybe that's Social Security or pensions and things like that. And then do your best estimation on what are my expenses, right, for every month. And then average it out, right? And a lot of times nowadays, people don't put a lot of thought into what their expenses are. And so the way that I like to help people figure it out, if we're just talking real simple and round numbers, is simply figure out what is your net pay. Like, while you're working, how much gets deposited into your bank account? After you've contributed to the 401k, after you've paid the taxes, what gets deposited into your bank account? All right, figure out what that number is and then decide, all right, am I spending more than that? Meaning at the end of the month, that bank account is really empty and I've been swiping the credit card and the credit card debt keeps going up, right? Then that means, hey, I'm spending more than whatever my net paycheck is. So for example, if it's $5,000 a month and there's nothing left at the end of the month and the credit card keeps climbing, you got a spending problem. You're spending more than your net income. So in retirement, and probably right now, we're gonna have to figure out how to create more income or cut expenses. But maybe you're on the flip side of that, right? And your net income's $5,000 a month and the savings account keeps piling up every month. Then that's a pretty good sign that, hey, you know, $5,000 a month in retirement is probably going to be everything that I need because your bank account keeps piling up. Now that's the quick, kind of what I call cowboy math way of figuring out what your income gap is. I would suggest, if you can, sitting down and getting a little more scientific, actually writing the budget out, writing the income out, thinking through, hey, what's going to change in retirement? Is the house going to get paid off? Am I not going to have to be putting kids through college anymore? Things like that. But if you want a quick starting point, that's the way I would do it. Once we've kind of got that figured out, we can start thinking about our financial home, right? So when we talk about 210 Financial, when we talk about building out our 210 retirement blueprint, we always think about it like building a home. So the foundation is the most important part, right? That's income planning. We're gonna have Social Security and pensions and whatever it is for you, right? That's part of our foundation. That's what we build everything else up on top of. But then we're gonna say, all right, if our income gap has a hole, meaning if your income is less than your expenses, we're gonna have to go to those accounts, those retirement savings, we're gonna have to pull money from them to fund these 30 years worth of retirement. And so in the foundation of our home, we may need to have some of those dollars that are pretty safe and accessible. We're gonna have to find a way to turn some of those dollars into a monthly stream of income to help fill that gap up, right? And so the foundation of our home is income planning, but then if we're using some investments to help fill that foundation up, I always like to say those investments need to have two requirements, right? They need to be principal protected, meaning they can't lose money, right? Because you don't want to be a forced seller in a down market. You don't want the market going down the same time you're taking money out. And then you need to get some sort of reasonable rate of return, right? And everybody has a different opinion on what reasonable rates of return are. In my mind, if I can't lose money, it's safe, cash-like assets, all kinds of different tools that we can use here to do this. 3 to 6% in my mind is a reasonable rate of return. So principal protected, reasonable rates of return are the two requirements that we need when we're thinking about filling up our financial home's foundation. If your question is, what tools should I use? That's really hard to answer in a video like this because I don't know anything about your personal situation. So if you want to dive into your personal situation and really start talking through what type of investments should I use to fill my income gap to fund those 30 years worth of retirement unemployment, that's certainly something that we can talk about with you. Then from there, once we get our foundation filled up, we can go to the walls and the roof of our home. So the walls is like money that, hey, we don't necessarily need every month to live on. These are dollars that are for down the road a long ways, right? Maybe 10, 15 years from now, we use some of that money to kind of refill our foundation if that foundation starts to run dry 10 or 15 years into our 30 years of retirement unemployment. The roof of our home, this is where we can take a lot of risk. Like this is money that we're not going to use for a long time. And so, those are dollars that can take a little more risk because the market's going to go up, the market's going to go down, and we've got time on our side to let those dollars recover and come back. So when I think about 30 years worth of unemployment, I think there's a few takeaways that we should talk about. The first thing is I think the first action item would be just what that mindset shift, right? We need to go from we're only going to be retiring for 5, 10 years to retirement can literally mean 20 or 30 or 40 years depending on your age and how long you're going to live. So I think we need to start thinking about, hey, this is going to be a big mindset shift. I'm going to have to go from working every day for a paycheck to having a plan and probably working that plan over those 30 years. It's going to take a little time. It's going to take a little effort in order to be able to fund 30 years worth of retirement unemployment, right? One of the things that I would also do after we kind of have that mindset shift is I would start doing the math, right? I would say, and when I say doing the math, this is not scientific. This is quick, chalkboard math that you can do. And it's like, figure out what the income gap is. If you've got a gap of, $4,000 to $6,000 a month that you got to fill up from your retirement savings, you spread that out over 30 years, that's $1.5 million, $2 million that we need in those retirement accounts to fill that income gap up. So those would be the two action items that I'd be taking away from this video. Mindset shift, figure out your gap, understand how close are we to how large our bucket is, right? So if you enjoy this video, if these things are fun, or if they're educational, if you want to continue to get notified, like I said earlier, about the income planning, the investment planning, the tax planning that's gonna go into funding these 30 years worth of retirement unemployment. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow along with me, and we'll keep educating you along the way.